Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. I'm Jenna Ellis. Join me at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Salem News Channel for Jenna Ellis Tonight. Our power panel is going to be back to weigh in, and we also have Oklahoma Superintendent Ryan Walters talking about how he is winning in the state of Oklahoma for bringing back the Bible and civics to the classroom. We're going to talk about that and the U.S. Constitution, but also we're going to talk about this ridiculous sham potential second impeachment of Ken Paxton, and where are the feckless, ridiculous, spineless, lacking political will Republicans on both the state and the federal level. We saw that there was no political will in Congress to actually hold Merrick Garland accountable, while Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro are sitting in jail for the exact same thing that Merrick Garland is clearly guilty of. So we're going to talk about all that and also the RNC convention preview coming up next week. All this and more, 9 p.m. Eastern, Salem News Channel. Hi friends, Jenna Ellis, host of Jenna Ellis Tonight, and we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an utter disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a constant issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, and those have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. So there are so many reasons that Americans should consider wise investing and investments in gold and silver, and Legacy Precious Metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com, download the free investor guide, and I have read it. There is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is the time to not roll the dice on your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that is in gold and that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals and make sure to tell them that I sent you. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. So a lot going on in Congress, and my question is, do we actually have a Republican majority, or do we just have a feckless majority that lacks any sort of political will? Well, I think that was on full display earlier today when Representative Paulina Luna actually brought a measure to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in inherent contempt of Congress. Now, this was a completely toned down measure. Initially, she wanted the House to pass a resolution to actually have the Sergeant at Arms go and arrest Merrick Garland and hold him in the House jail until he actually complied with Congress. You know, kind of the same thing that the DOJ is doing to Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro for their contempt of Congress and ignoring a congressional subpoena. But somehow when it's Democrats, the facts and the law just don't matter. They are actually above the law. And they're the ones that are screaming that democracy is on the ballot and no one is above the law. Apparently, that only applies to Republicans. And especially if your name is Donald Trump, you're well below the law and barely get due process as a matter of course. So this toned down bill only asked for a resolution that would have a daily fine of $10,000. Now, Merrick Garland isn't going to be paying that out of his pocket. So the best Republicans can do, is have the taxpayers foot a $10,000 a day bill for Merrick Garland's contempt of Congress. And that even failed. The vote earlier today was 204 versus 210. So do we even have a Republican majority? I don't really think so. But let's bring in our power panel to weigh in. Today's power panel is Robin Biro, who is a Democrat strategist. We have Jon Root, who is a sports and a political commentator. And we also have John Cardillo, who is a GOP strategist and a commentator. So, John, let's start with you. I think this is just utterly ridiculous that Congress can't even see fit to give the DOJ a taste of their own medicine while Bannon and Navarro sit in jail for doing the exact same thing that Merrick Garland is clearly guilty of.
Yeah. I mean, look, I said this when Mike Johnson, we had this speaker war, we blew up all this political capital. It was a ridiculous spectacle and debacle. And one of Johnson's first orders of business is to fund Ukraine without a penny for border security. And sadly, Donald Trump backed it up. I tweeted out the other day, we can win the White House in a landslide right now. The Dems are a mess, right? We should be salivating. We might be able to pick up 20 seats in the House. We can take the Senate back. And we'll do nothing with the power. We will do nothing with the power. We are the best. The current GOP is the best in history at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. It's really remarkable, Jenna. And we will sit here. This was a slam dunk. Merrick Garland is detested. Merrick Garland's behavior is egregious, unethical, and it's blatant prosecutorial misconduct. It's executed, his prosecutions are executed through the lens of left-wing political bias, and the Republicans couldn't even coalesce on that. They couldn't come together and sanction the worst, the most biased attorney general in U.S. history. It's really remarkable how good they are at failing us.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, there is almost no surprise at how utterly low they'll go. And yet daily, I'm actually still surprised, going like, you guys can't even get this one across the finish line. I mean, and this wasn't even about all of the lawfare or, the New York prosecution or any of this. I mean, this was just about turning over the audio tapes in addition to the transcript of Joe Biden's interview with his ghostwriter. And clearly the reason for that is that the audio is probably far more damning and damaging, because we all know if we got a transcript of the debate 2 weeks ago, then the transcript would be bad enough, but the audio was even way worse. So Robin, let's bring you in here. I mean, what is it about Democrats that you guys are somehow able to coalesce and actually get your agenda through, where Republicans, just can't, even though, I mean, I guess right now your party is in the same situation. We'll get to that in the next segment about, kind of the chaos around, do you have a nominee? Do you not? But at the same time, when it comes to policy priorities, somehow the Democrats can strategize and Republicans just can't.
That's due in part, Jenna, to former Speaker Nancy Pelosi's. She look for, I don't like her. I never have. John Cardillo remembers me on his show saying that she should be thrown to the island of Tristan da Cunha out in the ocean, in the middle of the ocean, and away from anybody. But she was a master at counting the votes and telling Democrats to fall in line. So and that still continues to this day under Hakeem Jeffries. He learned from her. So that's why Democrats, my party, can fall in line. Now, we love that Republicans can fall in line behind their candidate. That's something that I wish to God Democrats could do, as you're seeing, and we'll discuss in the next segment. But when it comes to whipping the votes, that is the one thing that we are good at, Jenna.
Yeah. And so, from your perspective, Robin, I mean, do you think that the Attorney General should be held to the very same standard as Republicans, even though he's a Democrat?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. Yes, he most definitely should be. I am in favor of that, actually. And look, I've got to be honest with you. Democrats don't like Merrick Garland much the same way that we don't like James Comey. We think that he's actually been feckless at his job. So, there's no love lost really for Merrick Garland for a litany of reasons on the left as well as the right.
Well, so Jon, why do you think that this was such a difficult contempt resolution to move forward, and that you saw this, across party lines, several Republicans, basically all of the Democrats voted against this? Is it just that Democrats are willing to protect their own, even if they think that Merrick Garland is feckless and weak and useless? Or are they just so, that entrenched into saying, no, we can't possibly coalesce and have bipartisan anything that's actually the rule of law? Or, what exactly is going on here?
Are you saying Jon Root?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. I guess there are two Johns. Jon Root. Yeah.
No, I mean, the first thing I think of during this situation is 100% people look at Republicans and they're not scared because they just know they're going to be able to get away and say anything they would really like. I mean, it just kind of seems like gentle parenting to me, where it's just like, we're going to sit them down. We're not really going to discipline them. No spanking. you're sparing the rod and you're spoiling the children. You have the ability, just like Jon said, to make a difference. And no matter what Garland does, he can consider parents that are against biological men going into their daughters' restrooms at school and considering them terrorists. And then when something like this happens, they know, Garland knows, Democrats know, they can do whatever they want because Republicans aren't going to come together, and then they're going to gentle parent the situation. And then it's going to be on the taxpayers, like you mentioned, to foot the bill.
Yeah, well, John Cardillo, you mentioned funding Ukraine, and in the midst of all of this, the speaker couldn't whip together votes enough to actually hold Merrick Garland in contempt for the crime he clearly committed.
Yeah.
And yet he sat down with Zelensky yesterday, and I'm thinking, all right, the taxpayers are going to have to get out their checkbook again. And this goes completely contrary to what Speaker Johnson promised when he first took over the gavel, that no more funding for their border until ours is secured. And clearly that's not happening.
No, it's not happening at all. But going back to the Merrick Garland situation, we saw this with Eric Holder years back, right? Eric Holder was the first attorney general held in both civil and criminal contempt of Congress. Republicans did nothing. So this Garland thing didn't surprise me. All one has to do is remember what happened with Holder, and you knew where this was going. But Johnson sitting with Zelensky is beyond the pale. And he's doing it at the same time China is now doing military exercises in Belarus, which, by the way, Belarus now has tactical nuclear weapons. Soviet, I call them Soviet because Putin's such a hardliner. Russian tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus. So right next door to Poland and to Ukraine. China is over there in Poland, or next door to Poland and Belarus, engaging in joint drills with the Russians. And there's some North Korean advisors on the ground. And you've got the Speaker of the House meeting with Zelensky. We've never been closer to World War III than we are now in nuclear World War III. And shame on Republicans for driving this. I think Johnson, let me tell you, I didn't like McCarthy. Then I softened up when McCarthy tried to toughen up. He listened to people. Johnson is far worse than McCarthy, because I don't think you would have seen Kevin McCarthy making an error like that, sitting with Zelensky while China was operating next door.
Yeah, and Jon Root, you kind of have to wonder who is advising Speaker Johnson. I mean, I've heard from people on Capitol Hill, and even internal to some of the other Republicans' offices, that this is a matter of getting really bad staffers. And we could say the same thing, that personnel was a problem during the first Trump administration, and hopefully if he gets a second administration, he won't make those same mistakes. But who exactly is advising Johnson, and why is this even a good idea?
It's not a good idea at all. And I think a lot of people are making the joke, which I think really hits it on the nose, is who's the highest paid actor in the world? It's Zelensky. And people are wondering, why is our money being spent like this? Why are our politicians somehow making this Ukraine first more than America first? Like, we can have a legit conversation about what's going on in the conflict overseas. But when we see Mike Johnson, even you bring it to like the anti-Semitism bills that are somewhat being pushed, where it seems like you are towing the line of the Bible being restricted and considered anti-Semitic, and holding to some of those biblical principles that Jews were part of the reason that Jesus was killed. And then we see a meeting with Zelensky. It's like, Mike Johnson, you seem to be holding to some of these core values, but you're hypocritical in this sense. And then, like, why is Zelensky? You're doing the same thing, just like Jon said. McCarthy seemed to hold the line on some stuff, and then it seems like it's just the same thing over and over again. And it's like, how much can we trust this guy at this point?
Yeah, and it's really sad that if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And we got an even worse speaker in some regard. I mean, I've known Mike Johnson personally for years, and I'm just bewildered by some of the decisions that he makes. But the last thing I'll say on Merrick Garland before I have to wrap this segment is that I hope that Congress would actually legislate on the DOJ, and like on the state level, when you can have a special prosecutor come in if there's corruption or there's allegations within that office, why don't we have anything to hold the DOJ accountable? I mean, they need to do more than inherent contempt. They actually need to hold the DOJ accountable. We'll be right back with more with our Power Panel. Well, friends, you might have heard that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, so they want to pass along the savings directly to you by having a $25 extravaganza. I love that word, extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. To get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, also awesome, only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are $25. And brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. For the first time ever, the premium MyPillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, or call 800-564-8475 today. That's 800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna. And we're back with our power panel with Thursday's roundup of the top trending topics. And I don't think this topic is going away anytime soon. So we have Robin Biro, Jon Root, and John, the one with an H, Jon Cardillo. And this coming from Politico Playbook, AM this morning. The ex-president, before Hollywood icon and Democratic donor George Clooney published his buzzy and brutal New York Times op-ed yesterday calling on Biden to step aside as the nominee, we're told he reached out to former President Barack Obama to give him a heads up. Interesting. The two men, who are friendly, both attended the LA fundraiser, Clooney referenced in his piece, where the actor said he'd beheld a diminished Biden and that the leader he interacted with was, quote, the same man we all witnessed at the debate. While Obama did not encourage or advise Clooney to say what he said, he also didn't object to it, we're told from people familiar with their exchange. The lack of pushback is an eye-popping revelation, given that the former president was one of the first big voices defending Biden following his abysmal debate performance, while many of his former aides have been some of the incumbent's biggest critics. So total disarray. And after that op-ed came out yesterday, this was on CNN last night, and I'm just laughing so hard because the White House reporter that was talking to Jake Tapper was suggesting that the Biden campaign was pushing back and actually saying that George Clooney didn't have as much stamina as Joe Biden because he left that donor event early after a photo op. I mean, maybe because the guy is like super wealthy and doesn't actually care. And Biden, who is the candidate at that event, stayed longer, and that's their defense. But watch Jake Tapper's face.
And in response to those comments from George Clooney, Jake, a campaign official who attended that Los Angeles fundraiser tells me that George Clooney left 3 hours before the president. So clearly the gloves are off. Jake.
But what does that mean that George Clooney left 3 hours? What's the point?
The point of that is to suggest that Biden's stamina is better than Clooney's, and Clooney didn't have, eyes on the entire event. That's the response to the Clooney op-ed.
Okay. Kayla Tashi, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Karen Finney.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love to talk about that.
I know this is your favorite topic. Look, it just seems like every day is going to be like this with people saying he should drop out, people that are Democratic Party stalwarts. George Clooney gets nothing out of this. What does he gain? The only reason to do this is because he feels like he needs to convey this.
Yeah.
How does this end?
So let's just stipulate to the facts that this is not good. This is bad. Let's just say the obvious, right?
Okay, thank you.
All right, Robin Biro, Democrats are clearly in disarray. I mean, come on. I think Jake Tapper was trying hard to not crack up more than he did. So where are Democrats in all this?
Jenna, it's just a mess. I don't want to get bleeped, so I'll just say it's a mess. But seriously, of course, this isn't good. But honestly, I really hate when we pivot to actors and Hollywood elite for any of this kind of stuff. I mean, I really could care less about their opinion. But the fact is that he's a huge mega donor. He brought George Clooney and the event that he threw brought in $28 million, which is massive to a campaign, as you well know. So this is not good that George Clooney's ringing the alarm. I'm not surprised at all that he brought it up to the New York Times, who's been coming for Biden here in recent days. But of course, my party's having a major crisis right now, and I'm just seeing, look. In my personal sphere, I'm seeing people defecting all over the place. I've got friends that are lifelong Democrats and stalwarts of GOTV saying that they're going to vote for Jill Stein, and I can't help but wonder, what world is this? What's happening? I mean, this has got to be about the worst case scenario that I could imagine as a Democratic strategist. My former boss, of course, Barack Obama, is sitting here on the sidelines just saying, sure, whatever. And that's not helping either. So, I mean, it's a complete mess.
Yeah, we'll just use that word mess again, because there are other choice words that probably would get us bleeped up. But, John Cardillo, Clooney is coming out with this now, but if he saw this at the debate, why didn't he say something sooner? I mean, Democrats' message for a long time is see something, say something. Doesn't that apply to Joe Biden?
Yeah, look, I think people are missing one thing here, though. Everybody thinks George Clooney's point is one of pure Democratic altruism, that he wants a winning candidate. There's another issue at work here for George Clooney. His wife, Amal Clooney, is a pretty big Hamas Palestinian pro-terror supporter, radically far left, big on the Middle East causes for all the wrong reasons and all the wrong people. And it's no secret that Clooney and his wife both feel that Biden has been a bit too cozy with Israel and a bit too tough on Hamas and the bad guys. And so I don't think Clooney's motives here are purely political in the sense of winning the election because of Biden's incapacitation. I think Clooney also wants Biden out because he knows Kamala is going to be a lot. Well, first, she's a complete mess and she's malleable, but she'll probably be much more hardline against Israel and a little bit softer on some pretty horrible people who want to see Americans dead. So George Clooney's opinion, it means as much to me as one of the iguanas running around outside. I mean, it's worth less than nothing, but it is very telling that Obama, like you say, Jenna, is saying, whatever, go for it. I mean, everybody knows Biden's done, right? I mean, there's not a person with minimally functional eyesight and hearing who think Joe Biden will last a second term and can function for the rest of this term. And so, Clooney's doing what he needs to do. I just don't think his motives are what most people think they are. I think they're a little bit more sinister when it comes to some pretty bad people.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating analysis. And Jon Root, this exchange that Politico is reporting this morning between Clooney and Obama, and how Obama's just saying, well, hey, I'm washing my hands of this. I mean, wouldn't it be better for Barack Obama, as really the leader of the Democrat Party, to actually come out himself and say, listen, we got to coalesce behind another candidate of maybe his choosing, or the Clinton Foundation, or whoever in the Democrat Party is actually running things? It seems interesting that he and Nancy Pelosi and others. I mean, Chuck Schumer has even said that he would be okay with another candidate, but he's not suggesting who. And so the time is really running out for Democrats to actually choose another candidate and coalesce. But now, I mean, what is George Clooney going to do? Walk this back and say, oh, well, hey, democracy's on the ballot, so let's be like Joy Reid and vote for the dude basically in a coma before we vote for Donald Trump? I mean, I don't see that as a winning message.
Yeah, and then also too, we're seeing it being reported from Axios that Joe Biden needs to be told where the podium is, and that go to the podium when you speak. So people know that he's cognitively not there. But George Clooney and all the Democrats coming together, like we talked about in the last segment, they come together so much better than Republicans. So we got to start asking the question: why is this messaging so in unison on the Democrat side? Why do they feel like they can say these things no problem? Because we can talk about, all right, where have you been the last 3 years? Obviously, he hasn't been there mentally. Obviously, he seems to be a puppet in a lot of ways, but now they're finally coming together. And I think that just goes to show that, again, I think, George Clooney can say whatever he wants. Democrats will come together because I don't think they're really scared of Trump, to be completely honest. I mean, we can disagree on that if we want, but I think they believe that whether it's Biden or somebody else, they can still beat him, so they can come together in unison on their messaging.
And yeah, it's really interesting. And, of course, Trump looks at the polls really closely. And, his campaign thinks that he's got this locked, regardless of whether it's Biden or Kamala or someone else. And it's going to be very interesting heading into the RNC convention next week, where we're going to bring the power panel back in just a little bit to talk about that. But next, more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Hi friends, Jenna Ellis, host of Jenna Ellis Tonight, and we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an utter disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a constant issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, and those have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. So there are so many reasons that Americans should consider wise investing, and investments in gold and silver, and legacy precious metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com, download the free investor guide, and I have read it. There is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is the time to not roll the dice on your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that is in gold and that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals and make sure to tell them that I sent you. Well, Democrats masquerading as Republicans in the state of Texas are actually attempting to launch a second impeachment inquiry into Attorney General Ken Paxton. This, of course, following his resounding victory in his initial Senate trial there in the state of Texas. And this is really all about lawfare. I mean, his name has been floated as the possible United States Attorney General under a second Trump administration. And this also follows a resounding win of 15 seats that were primaried for these basically Democrat-light Republicans out of the Texas state legislature, with actual Republicans taking their place. So Attorney General Ken Paxton joined Rob Schmidt on Newsmax to talk about it. Last night, this is what he had to say.
Yeah, the same group, the House General Investigating Committee, headed up by Andrew Merrick, who's been knocked out of office. He won't be there after January because his own constituents didn't want him after what he did to me in the last summer. There's indications that this House Investigating Committee, which is supposedly controlled by the Republicans, but largely controlled by the Democrats, in fact, is actually looking at cooperating with the Biden administration to try to take me out with a federal case or do another impeachment in the House, trying to take me out through the Texas House. That's the direction that it looks like, and they're meeting next Wednesday to discuss this very issue.
And the allegation would be what? Because I mean, they failed. The last time they tried to impeach you, you won the case. So what's the impeachment? What's the federal case this time?
Well, look, it's the same exact facts, same exact story. They're just going to try to rehash it and repackage it and try to do the same thing a different way. That's all this is. And it's ridiculous because they spent millions and millions of dollars doing this last summer. They took us away from doing the focus of going after the Biden administration and some of these big tech companies. Yeah. And now they're back trying to do the same thing to stop my office from accomplishing the goals that we need to accomplish for the state and really for the entire country.
It's really a look at just how ugly politics can be right there. Ken Paxton, we appreciate you coming on. Thank you, sir.
I had the exact same just gut-wrenching reaction that Rob Schmidt did, because this is all about Democrat lawfare. They are not satisfied when they don't get the outcome that they prefer. And instead of actually adhering to due process standards or, anything that remotely looks like the rule of law, they are just out to target their political opponents. And for the state legislature to be contemplating calling themselves back into session and scouring, as sources on the ground are telling me just today, they are scouring the Texas state constitution and statutes statutes, seeing if they can do that without the consent of the governor, and calling themselves back into session just for the purpose of going after Ken Paxton or having a federal case on the exact same legal issue. This is nothing more than Democrats targeting a political opponent. And so where are the Republicans? I mean, Ken Paxton has been so good for election integrity, for protecting the interests and rights of the people of the state of Texas. He's doing his job. I mean, we just heard from the Supreme Court about presidential immunity and executive immunity for official action. But this is a targeted lawfare for Ken Paxton actually doing his job. I mean, they're making up utter nonsense and BS to try to impeach him. That utterly failed in the Senate last time. But now they're trying to make literally a federal case out of it just because they can't stand that Ken Paxton has now become probably the most popular, if not the most powerful politician in the state of Texas, and he's not on their team. So this morning, while Republicans wouldn't even hold Merrick Garland in contempt for a clear violation of contempt of Congress, now so-called Republicans are actually going after Ken Paxton for something that remotely resembles a legal basis. What is the problem with Republicans in this country? I'm sick and tired of being held to whatever standard the Democrats and the Republicans masquerading as Republicans that they want to impose on this country. Do we have a rule of law or do we not? This is absolutely a sham. Ken Paxton should not have the time, expense, and just political capital that would have to be spent defending against yet another sham impeachment or a federal case. I mean, this is the same thing that President Trump is having to deal with in New York and elsewhere. And this is the same thing that a lot of conservatives who are being targeted by the DOJ just for standing up for their faith are having to overcome in this country. What happened to the rule of law? What happened is this: Republicans are spineless and have absolutely no political will to stand up and simply say no. So we need to rally behind Ken Paxton, and I absolutely support him. He's the Attorney General of the state of Texas, and hey, I think he'd be great on the United States level. We'll be right back with more. Well, conservatives who actually want to return to America's founding and our biblical heritage have become public enemy number one to the extreme radical, progressive, communist, Marxist Democrats. And there is no one above the tip of the spear more than Superintendent of Oklahoma Public Schools, Ryan Walters. So this coming reporting from Tyler Kincaid on X, just in, Oklahoma's top education official Ryan Walters says the state's social studies standards are going to be overhauled by a committee that includes Dennis Prager, David Barton, Steve Deace, and Kevin Roberts. This is absolutely awesome. And that civics program absolutely deserves to be overhauled. And so the Oklahoma Schools Union said this on X in response. The Education Association, the state superintendent of public instruction continues to show deference to out-of-state political agitators by appointing them to Oklahoma academic committees. And Ryan Walters responded to that saying, "You are absolutely correct. Unions will no longer have influence on the standards process. Consider this the end of union indoctrination on our kids in Oklahoma." Bye. So Superintendent Ryan Walters joins me now. And sir, I applaud you for standing up for America's founding, for civics, and for just wanting to go back to the basics of truth in our public education system. So what does this curriculum actually entail, and what is your vision for Oklahoma?
Well, thank you very much for that, Jenna. You know, what you've seen here is it's amazing. That teachers union is the same one that was pushing genderqueer and flamer into the classrooms in Oklahoma schools and fought me when I removed those books, that now are just taking exception that, oh, heaven forbid, we're going to actually have our kids understand the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, and the Bible's historical role in our schools. So what you're seeing here is we are very excited about this executive committee. Our kids are going to understand our history, and they're going to start by understanding that founding era in American history by studying directly from our founders, reading primary sources. You see this all the time with left-wing indoctrination, our textbooks. It's what a 1960s or 70s left-wing historian says about the founders. Well, no, our kids are going to actually read a lot of the works written by Jefferson, read through the Federalist Papers, read through the constitutional notes from the convention. And this is where our kids are going to have a better understanding of American history and American exceptionalism, more so than any other kids in the country. And the other thing that is really making them mad, Jenna, is we are going to bring back the most read, the most cited, the most purchased book in American history. That's the Bible. in its historical context in our classrooms. So guess what? Our kids are going to understand when the Pilgrims came to America, yes, that had something to do with their faith, that with the Bible. Yes, when Thomas Jefferson said, we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, he was talking about the Judeo-Christian God. When you talk about Martin Luther King Jr. referencing the Apostle Paul, yes, our kids are going to understand those biblical references and their impact on American history.
And that seems just so straightforward, and yet the left is screaming, separation of church and state, and you can't bring religion into the classroom. Well, first, separation of church and state is actually nowhere in the U.S. Constitution or in the First Amendment. It's a doctrine invented by a runaway judiciary to excise specifically the Judeo-Christian worldview from public institutions. But then also they're just denying our history because, right there in the marble of the U.S. Supreme Court is Moses himself, who got the 10 Commandments as a tablet. I mean, they recognized that these legal figures throughout not just America's history, but world history that do come from the history in the Bible had an impact and influence on our civics, our U.S. Constitution, our jurisprudence. And so it makes sense why children should read these primary sources and actually learn an accurate view of history. And so when the left is pushing back and saying, this is separation of church and state, I mean, they're willing to put their religious view into the classroom under queer theory and Marxism. Why isn't anyone calling that out except you?
Oh, that's a great point. And, really what we have here is state-sponsored atheism. I mean, if the approach of schools is, when Jefferson mentions Creator or God, when you see this in documents, when you hear it from nearly every president in American history who cite biblical examples, Bible verses, talk about God, when you remove those things out, what you've done is created an apparatus in our schools to say, we're going to push an atheist view of our history on kids. Frankly, it's academic malpractice to not have the inclusion of the Bible and its historical relevancy in the classroom. How do you even start with understanding why the Pilgrims, why did they risk their lives to come here? I mean, you're going to lie to kids and act like it was about something other than their religious freedom and their belief in the Bible. But this is what you see from the left. What they want is they want our kids to hate this country. They want our kids to not understand the true history of our country so they can reshape our country into a Marxist worldview. If our kids actually study our history, not only do they see that the founders said our rights came from God, that means, number one, they believe they couldn't be taken from you, right? So that's something that would be more protected. Our rights would be if our kids understood that. But number two, what did Jefferson, what did John Adams, what did Washington say about a constitution and the role the people play with a constitution like this? They said this constitution was made for a moral people, for religious people. That's part of our history. They believed that the people of America needed to self-govern based on their morality, based on their religious faith. For this experiment in a constitutional republic to be successful. So taking out half of that equation and lying to kids that didn't play a role in the founders' decision-making is outrageous, and we're not going to stand for it here in Oklahoma.
Yeah, and I fully applaud you in this because so many people are confusing bringing the Bible back into classrooms for a religion class versus a basic civics and history class. And so many people who actually haven't read the Bible for themselves think that it is just a religious text, but it actually contains a lot of history and also did influence a lot of not only the Enlightenment thinkers, but the founding era. It's no different than reading, Blackstone or John Locke or any of these other philosophers that influenced our founding. And, in my law school class, we didn't even read the primary source of the U.S. Constitution or the Federalist Papers. All we did was read the Supreme Court opinion, starting with Marbury versus Madison. And it took me going back and actually looking at that to contrast that and say, well, wait a minute, I think the Supreme Court got it wrong over here. But that's exactly what the left is trying to do. So I'm really excited that you're doing this in Oklahoma. Are you kind of setting out a blueprint for other red states to follow if they have the courage?
Absolutely. And you made a great point there. You see the same thing in law, right? Where instead of reading the primary sources, you're reading, what someone said about them. Same way in our history courses, we've seen that where kids aren't reading directly from the founders. And frankly, they're never going to have the appreciation or understanding from them until we actually have them read them. And that's the other thing. The left can be offended. They cannot like it, but they can't rewrite our history. To your point, it is very clear the Bible was the most cited work of the 17th and 18th century for a reason. It played a major role in the founding of our country. And to your point, absolutely, this is the blueprint. Every state should be doing this. you are not teaching your kids true American history if the Bible is not included in its historical context. So every state should be making sure that that's absolutely a part of the story of America, because it's lying to kids if it's not included. And frankly, what we have is a situation we can absolutely challenge, win any challenge in the courts. If the ACLU and everybody else wants to sue us, I feel very confident about our legal backing, about our historical backing. I mean, Lauren, even the New York Times put in there that, well, Ryan's technically correct that the Bible would have been the most prominent book in a classroom up until the 1960s. Even the New York Times is fact checking us, saying, yeah, actually they are right. Until the 1960s, it would have been in every classroom. So that's the reality. The legal system is the basis of our legal system supports us, and history supports us.
Yeah, and no wonder, especially the left, but I think even some on the right that are getting away from true conservatism and our founding and are going for this kind of godless populism. They're, of course, scared of this, because if you teach kids the actual correct history of the United States of America, they understand why we inherit the blessings of liberty, what our founders actually created with our system of government, where we have pre-political rights. And we're seeing this, of course, the left wants cultural Marxism, all this, but even some on the right, Ryan, really don't understand this. And so they've sort of separated, well, go have your faith in a corner over there, maybe in your churches, but we want to have a party that is self-governing, that basically means, and their definition of that is totally libertine, where we can just invent reality however we want. And this is how we get to the right acquiescing on a lot of these social issues that inform policy. So, I mean, these are the kids that are going to grow up and be office holders someday. So it is really important that they understand America's founding in the context that was originated. So in just the last about 30 seconds, where does this go from here, and how soon are you going to implement this program?
We're implementing it immediately. The schools this fall, when they come back in August, the Bible will absolutely, we have new guidance to make sure that they understand they will be teaching it in its historical context. We are rewriting the standards now to even bolster what we are going to teach in regards to the Bible in the future and its historical context in our schools. And again, with this panel, we've got some great folks on here that are going to help us with the executive committee make sure that we are teaching history in the state of Oklahoma better than any other state, because we want our citizens to be able to keep this country going forward.
Amen to that. And we should all be proud to be Americans. Well, Ryan Walters, applaud you. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. And we're back with our power panel for the last of today's top trending topics with Robin Biro, Jon Root, and Jon Cardillo. So, while the focus should just be on the Democrats and all of their chaos, Republicans just couldn't help but again snatch defeat from the jaws of victory by having their own controversy heading into next week in Milwaukee by trading Lila Rose and live action and pro-life for Amber Rose and Slut Walk, and just a total disaster. This was posted in one of my replies on X from an account named Kelly L. McCurdy that says conservative with kind of that really not so pleasant emoji, that is showing a screenshot of Amber Rose's founder of Slut Walk, and she's her bio in here is saying that she's empowering women and LGBTQ plus community while ending sexual and social injustice, derogatory labeling, and gender inequality. So, Jon Root, this totally sounds like a Republican conservative to me.
It's absolutely jaw-dropping to see things like this, because this is what pretty much every other conservative media outlet does too. It's like, oh, you used to be a radical leftist, and now you support Trump. We have to promote you. We're not just going to say, here, come to the RNC. We're happy to have you. No, we're going to put you up on stage. And this person is not conservative in any sense. There's no modesty being promoted there. It's pro-LGBTQ. She's all for the killing of babies through abortion. But it seems like that's kind of the route that the Republican Party is kind of going. They've been on this slippery slope for a while, so might as well promote someone that has a little bit of conservatism and just promote and exploit that. But I think in about 20 years, this is going to be unrecognizable and not even close to a conservative party whatsoever, because basically already there now.
Yeah, and Jon Cardillo, this is basically godless populism. I mean, if you put slut walk in a MAGA hat, then hey, let's parade her on stage at the RNC convention and claim that she's conservative. I mean, this looks nothing like the traditional values that the Republican Party once championed. This looks exactly like what Senator Marco Rubio actually admitted, that the platform is going to reflect the nominee.
Yeah, look, I put this up on X yesterday. What are people surprised about? She's hot. She wore a MAGA hat in a revealing bathing suit. Of course, Trump invited her to the RNC. I mean, let's be realistic here. That's all it takes. We had a more conservative option in the primary. Many supported him. The base wanted center-left populism. And this convention and the party is now reflective of what the base wanted. This is what it is. I don't really care that she's speaking. Nobody really, speakers at the RNC don't really matter. They don't move needles. I don't think she moves cultural needles either way. I don't think she brings votes, but let's call it what it is. She's a hot woman who wore a MAGA hat in a bathing suit. It was a sexy pic. Trump loved it. She got invited on stage. End of story. You don't even need to analyze any further than that. Jenna, you know this. You were in the orbit for a long time.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate reality that is totally true. I mean, it matters more that, you're a young, hot woman than, someone who maybe is like the old white guy who actually can philosophize on conservative values. I mean, it's just really sad. But, Robin, from the perspective that the Democrats under Joe Biden are, kind of the far left progressivism. I mean, I remember, Jill Biden saying that decency is on the ballot. And then we saw how the White House invited, all of these, trans influencers, and you had, the topless, men and women on the White House lawn. I mean, all of this vulgarity. What do you think of the Republican Party that's mirroring some of that on stage at their own convention?
Jenna, it's giving fodder to the narrative about there being a uniparty, frankly. And look, it's not lost on me that Amber Rose dated Kanye, or maybe is still dating him. I don't keep up with celebrity news. But, here we are. But yeah, my friends on the right, my friends on the left are both saying that we are in the time right now of the uniparty. And I think this is proof positive.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, and I've said for a while that, we need to take our stranglehold away from, the institution that's been captured by the uniparty, because the Democrats and the Republicans need each other for political power. But at least they used to have some contrast. And Jon Root, I'll give you the last word here in the last minute we have. I mean, is there hope that the Republican Party is going to potentially swing back to, maybe a moral and upright society, or at least advocating for that?
I don't think so. And I think it's 100% what everybody were in unison here on this panel, just saying it's like, we're already way down the slippery slope. You're trying to climb back up to these traditional values. It's not going to happen. And especially with someone like Trump, I know people will get mad at me when I say online about it. It's like, yeah, he endorses this. And anybody that is loyal to him in any sense, he's going to promote it and he's going to platform these people. What set the Republican Party, in contrast to the Democrat parties, we had these traditional American values, and I believe a lot of them were founded based off biblical ideals, and now we don't see that.
And we got to leave it there, but yeah, and I think my friend Tony Perkins said it well. Are we going to stand for biblical truth or acquiesce to the spirit of the age? That's the question heading into next week. See you tomorrow night.